Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome to Sarbat GupShup with Rahni Kaur. My name is Makinder Chahal. I'm one of the volunteers at Sarbat, and I'm your host for this event. So, if you don't know already, Sarbat has been funded by the COVID-19 Metro Fund to deliver a whole variety of different activities and online stuff. And part of that is delivering this series and the series of gupshops exploring some a bit and to find out a bit more about some of the Sarbat members from across the world. So we've already had two gupshops, and this is the third, and there'll hopefully be two more as part of the series over the upcoming months. But for now, we'll focus on today, and we're here with Rahni Kaur. So hi, Rahni.
Hiya, everyone.
How are
Shall
you
I say
doing?
Sasrikal?
Sasrikal, yeah. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good.
Good
Yeah.
stuff. Awesome. So before we talk a bit more with Rani, I've got a bit of a bio that Rani sent across to me to read out to find out, just to kind of like lay the baseline before we get to know and find out a bit more about her. So Rani Kaur is a Punjabi Sikh. She has 3 decades of working to end violence against women, violence against the women and girls sector. In various roles, Rani has worked as a frontline practitioner, counsellor, team leader, senior manager, and CEO. She has been instrumental in leading the strategic direction, design, and delivery of frontline services, including refuge, advocacy, outreach, counselling, and training provision for Black and minoritized women and girls, HIV positive young people, addressing racial harassment across housing, education, and employment, sexual violence, community development, women whose partners were in prison, and homelessness. And as a committed Black feminist activist, Rani has a long history of involvement in grassroots movements for change and focusing on human rights, equality, and social justice. That is the most spectacular bio I've ever read of anybody for such a long time. So I'm sure we're going to find out a lot more about you as a person and a lot more about the work which you do as part of this workshop today. So yeah, so I think just to start with, Rani, I know you kind of touched on at the beginning of that bio, you being from a Punjabi Sikh background. So I guess if we just find out a bit more about kind of like those identities and kind of where you are in the world right now.
Right now, I'm in Nottingham. So yeah, I've been back home for the last 3 months. Yeah. So yeah.
That's great. And have you always been in Nottingham, or have you lived in
No. Like a lot of Punjabis that came over in the sort of 50s, my parents came to Gravesend and settled there in Kent back in the good old 50s. I was born in Kent. My parents moved to Kent, and then we moved on to Birmingham. So kind of went to school there, did a bit of my work there, and then I just travelled wherever my relationships took me or jobs took me, and I've ended up in Nottingham now. But my home's in Nottingham, but I was working in London, so I'm back in Nottingham now.
Great, so slowly kind of snaking your way up the United Kingdom. And it's interesting that you've got roots in Gravesend, because actually I know when my dad came over in the 60s, he first was in Gravesend too. And I do know that Gravesend has that big, massive new brother as well now.
Yeah.
So I've also got some like family links down in Gravesend, and actually quite a large Punjabi community in Gravesend too.
Yeah, I think back in the 50s when Punjabis came over, from what I remember from the conversations from my parents, was a lot actually moved to Gravesend in Kent, that part of the world, and then slowly moved to Birmingham and then Southall and kind of spread themselves around. But it seems like there's a lot of us that, you know, our kind of families and our roots were in Gravesend. It's, yeah.
I think a lot of that, from what I recall as well, is when a lot of people first came to the UK, they'd often settle where they either came off a boat or off a plane.
Yes.
So when we're looking at off a boat, when we're looking at the East End and the East End docks of London, very much kind of like setting around there. And then a lot of the folks who have travelled in by plane to Heathrow, that's where kind of where it's all happening at the moment. So I know that's some kind of like link to that.
Yes.
But no, that's great. And then kind of, like I said, making your way and then spend a lot of your time growing up in Birmingham. Kind of like, how was that for you, like growing up in Birmingham?
So I grew up in the sort of 70s, 80s in Birmingham, junior school, primary school, secondary school. It was great. It was a time when, you know, we were able to play outside, you know, and most of our time was outside playing, really, with your neighbours, hanging out on the street, going to the Gurdwara on a Wednesday for the women's groups, and then going to the Gurdwara on Saturday and Sunday, going to, you know, Punjabi classes because it was so important. But it was really weird because even though we went Punjabi classes, there for us, you know, in terms of my own experience, we weren't actually kind of told. We were like forced. There wasn't a conversation around why it was important, you know, to read Punjabi, learn it and read the scriptures, sit down, you know, and actually understand and have a relationship. It was more of a forced thing. And I don't know whether that was because my parents, their own experience was similar. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't that they learnt it themselves. They were forced to, maybe. I don't know. But so yeah, so going to the Gurdwara was like, you know, you just went there to meet your mates. Yeah. You know, and run around, you know, and you did a bit of Uda Era, you know, you read a bit, and then, you know, you got, in those days, you used to get like beat. You know, they'd take out a little dunda and then they'd hit you on your hands if you didn't, you were talking or you weren't saying the words right. But there wasn't even then the teachers didn't explain it. You know, they were lay people themselves. I don't think they were qualified teachers as in, you know, what they may have now, but they were basically quite tyrants. You know, they were like really bullish. They weren't really explaining. It was like you were told what to do. You had to do what you were told, and there was no, you couldn't answer, you couldn't ask questions. That, I think that was the frustration, that you couldn't ask questions. And if you ask questions, why are you asking? You know, I was quite inquisitive as a child, and that got me into trouble quite a lot. So yeah, so going to the Gurdwara was fun because you hung out with your friends again, but learning Punjabi and listening and reading was not joyful at all. No.
No, it's really interesting because especially with a lot of first generational Sikhs or Punjabis who moved over to the UK, a lot of it was kind of like hiding that identity. And almost like with the second generation that bore from the first generation, it's kind of like, well, we've had to hide, but we don't want to hide anymore. So therefore, we want you to be super visible and super proud of this culture, language, background that we have, that many people had to kind of like put on the back burner, because, you know, like in the 50s and 60s maybe weren't a safe time for Punjabi people or any BAME people for that matter. And also as well, kind of like reflecting on a lot of kind of the racism experienced by people within kind of like, you know, the 60s all the way up into the 80s and beyond. I mean, you know, a lot of people of first generation very familiar with the Southall riots, etc. So kind of like, how was that kind of reflected within your background?
So, you know, I was brought up in Handsworth. Yeah, so we saw the uprising, we saw the demonstrations, you know, in terms of stop and search, in terms of African people being stopped, much more South Asian men being stopped as well. You know, there was a lot of tension, you know, but one of the things in terms of my generation growing up, we very much had, I felt we had a bit of a solidarity with the Jamaican community where we were growing up. It wasn't them and us for us, you know, it was, we were very much quite close, because at the end of the day, the enemy, you know, was the racism that our parents were experiencing. We lived literally off Soho Road. So if you're familiar with Birmingham and you're familiar with Handsworth, back in the sort of 70s, 80s, predominantly, Punjabi community, Hindu community, Pakistani community, but predominantly a Sikh community. And every weekend when we were in, early sort of 80s, there was a National Front march. So you knew, by a particular time you had to be inside your house, because they'd be marching down Grove Lane onto Soho Road. And, you would be attacked. I remember one time, which was so frightening, I got caught up in it because I had to go and phone. We didn't have phones in our houses then. We had phone boxes. It's going back a while. So I was in a phone box and I got caught up in this, this racist demonstration that was going past, and they were banging, these white men were banging on the window. I was shitting myself. I was so scared. And I was holding, I was about sort of 10, 11, I was holding the door, and they were banging it and banging it. I mean, they walked off, but the police didn't really do much. They were standing on the side. They weren't stopping. They were like laughing, or they weren't really bothered to see. They could see that I was in there. They could see that I was scared. As soon as they kind of moved on, I ran home. But I never told my parents, because I thought if I told my parents, then they won't let me out again. They won't let me out to play. They won't let me to go to the shop. So as a young girl growing up in a Sikh family, in a Punjabi Sikh family, there were certain things you just wouldn't tell your parents. If your safety, for me, if my safety was at risk, I wouldn't tell my parents, because my freedom of actually going out would be stopped. So I just thought, the best thing is not to say anything. So the time I was growing up, that's what was happening. But there was a bit more of I think, a community feel. Majority of the people that lived on our little avenue were, African or South Asian, a few white people, but it was a very small community and you were very close. You knew you were in and out of everyone's house. You were playing. It was for me, it was a really good time, despite all the other stuff that was happening as a child. There was this kind of community feeling, which I think is slightly lost to some degree, because you don't know who your neighbours are, And
that's the thing, and it sounds like you had quite a nice supportive bubble. I mean, I know this term support bubble is very much used during the coronavirus pandemic, but that's almost what it sounds like. Kind of like amongst all the madness happening around you, you had your little bubble where kind of like you felt a sense of safety and everybody knew you and were kind of looking out for one another. And kind of and do you feel kind of like, although you said that sense of community may have been lost, do you feel that a lot of kind of that influence or the kind of things that you saw when you were growing up has kind of shaped the direction of work that you've now gone into?
Has it shaped? I think the experiences I've had and things I've seen, and when we were growing up, you couldn't question. So you couldn't question your faith. You couldn't question scriptures, and you'd say, well, why are all the guru men, why they've all got beards? Except for one, I think one doesn't. But, why do they look like those sort of things? You couldn't, why does it say this? Or, why do we only have a one day for women? Why do women sit on this side and men sit on that side? Why can't we all sit together? And what you'd face is a slap, or you'd be shouted at, or you must never talk like that. You're kind of, it's not the right thing to say. Do you know what I mean? So I continued to question, which didn't always help. And then I thought, well, you know what? It's important that I question, because then how do I know what this is all about? So I suppose I carried on, which led me to the life I live now. I don't know. I think things did shape, things that I saw that happened that I didn't like, how women were treated. You'd go to weddings, you go to Punjabi weddings, but all the women were always together and the men were together. And it was like, there wasn't necessarily you know, the men and women weren't always together. You'd always be in separate spaces. And I suppose I thought, you know what, this can't be right. We can't, why do we have to be all separate? And that whole thing around, you know, when men would come over, men would be in one room, women would be in one room. And I just thought, this is just ridiculous. You know, and men would usually drink and women would have a sneaky little drink, but not share that with everyone, and have a little sneaky little smoke, but not, again, not share that with anyone. And it was all that hiding that really was, I think it really messes with your head as a child. You know, you suppress things as a child, and then as an adult, you start remembering certain things and you think, why did we do that? Why did we? I don't know why we did that. You know, why did they do that? You know, does our faith tell us? Is it our custom? What is it? What tells us that we have to be separate? You know, what tells us, does our scriptures tell us that? And I know for me, in terms of coming to Sikhi or kind of having an understanding and a relationship with it has been, you know, me looking at it myself, you know, reading scriptures, listening to different people talking about it, you know, not necessarily what you would say somebody who's like educated in religion or a theologian, I suppose that's what you would say, yeah, but people have kind of explored it themselves, and it's been really interesting because it's been an eye-opener. You know, when people say to me, well, you know, you can't really do much because you're a Punjabi, or you can't, you know, there is an expectation that you would be a certain way when I was growing up. And I thought, no, it doesn't mean I have to be that way. And I think it took time. And I would say I'm still on a journey trying to work out, what does it mean to me? You know, why do I have to have a certain way of being? Do I have to be this way? How can I be? What is my relationship to it? So yeah, so I would say for me, it's been learning myself, really.
And I can definitely hear how like your inquisitiveness and your curiosity from such a young age has really kind of helped you shape but also navigate the way in which you want to live your life, but also the way in which you want to shape your world and the world around you too. And kind of reflecting back on some of those first relationships with Sikh, and I know you've mentioned kind of, you know, going to Punjabi school, going to the Gurdwara, meeting new friends there. And would you say your kind of like your relationship with Sikhi started from there, or did it start from home life, and how did it kind of continue on from there?
I think it's been a bit of a yo-yo, bit of a roller coaster. As a child, I loved it. As a child, I hated it because there were restrictions. And I remember when I was about 14, I used to go to, I think it was a Wednesday at the Gurdwara, and it was just for women and girls. And I loved it, absolutely loved it. You know, you'd get to play the instruments and you'd get to listen to Kirtan, and you'd listen to the women, the way they would pronounce and say. I felt really grounded. It was such a lovely space. And I'd go there straight after school, you know, and I'd go there by myself. My mum wouldn't come with me. And it was brilliant. I loved it, absolutely loved it. And as I got older, I started to question, well, what is it? What is it that I like? I like the calmness that it brought in me. I like the kind of meditativeness of it. But as I got older and I you know, as a teenager in my 20s, I didn't like it, you know, because I felt so angry that my mum, when I came out to her, rejected me on the basis of her faith and what community would say. And I thought, you know what? No, I don't want anything to do with it. And it was a really messed up time, because even though I didn't want anything to do with it, as my children were growing up, I took them to Punjabi classes. I took them to the Gurdwara.
You did the same thing.
I did the same thing, you know. But what I did do, I did get the books that were in English and Punjabi and explain to them. I read them the stories, so that was slightly different. And then I think it changed, you know. I suppose for me, in terms of, it's always been this kind of push and pull feel, in terms of, well, what is Sikhi? What does it mean? And who am I within it in terms of my sexuality as a lesbian, and feeling like I'm a Sikh and having an understanding of Sikhi. What does that actually mean? And I suppose for me, I'm still on that journey. What does that actually mean? And it's great. You know, I would say I more so now than ever before, I feel more settled within it. You know, I totally have a better understanding as an adult now. And I don't know whether it is because in the last sort of 10 years, as I've been going to India back and forth with my mother when she was around, and my brother, is I've been to certain places, you know, and I've explored, you know. I go to Nandpur Sahib a lot. I absolutely love it. And and I suppose I love it because I know particular stories of my family that used to go there. And my, you know, father was a Nang Sikh for a while, you know, all those sort of things. And I think there's a bit of romanticizing of it, maybe, which I am, you know, I'm very familiar with. But I think having that relationship with my older brother and my mum before she passed, you know, and then sharing the stories of our ancestors, you know, what their relationship was with Sikhi, you know, who they were, and how that's sort of evolved over generations. That's been a good learning and a good understanding. And I think oral history is really important. And I think, you know, one of the things I would say to whoever's listening, it's really important, if you have a particular generation around, you know, in terms of your elders, you know, your grandparents, you know, speak to them, to get them to share the oral history, because I think once that's gone, then we won't know, because a lot of the oral history isn't written down. You know, now we're writing stuff around the partition, you know, and my family, part of my family were in Pakistan, you know, and came over after the partition. So, you know, my mom shared a lot of stories. So if you can record them, I would say whoever's listening, you know, get them recorded and talk about, you know, I didn't know that back in the day, like when my mom was a child, they used to, even though we were from a Sikh family, and they say we should cremate, my grandfather buried his wife because he couldn't afford to cremate, because they would tax you to cremate. So, you know, those sort of things, where you wouldn't get them in a book, you know. So it's like a lot, this is important. That's our learning. You know, you learn from the past to go forward. It's so important. Our history, her story is so important that we get to know it, to share it. And if we can like have it recorded, then that's a bonus. And I think with the technology we have these days, I think if you can, you know, it's so important that you do, because you'll get to know something that you would never have known before about our parents or our grandparents' journey, what it meant to them to get to where they are right now, you know?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I can really kind of like hear how, like with your relationship with Sikh, you're very much intertwined with family life too, and actually how, you know, with the, not the influence of family, but I think like with the support of family kind of guiding you through with Sikhi, sometimes guiding you in a way which you accept, but sometimes where Sikhi has been used against you, like you said, when you did come out to your mother. And I think that that's a kind of like good opportunity to kind of explore that kind of like journey now with your lesbian identity. Kind of like, how did that all come about? Like, just take us from the beginning when you started to have feelings, and then right the way up until today.
Oh my God, how far do you want me to go back?
As far as you want, Rahni.
So what, me coming out, that bit, will that do? Yeah.
Yeah, we can start from there.
Yeah. Oh God, save all the sordid details. Let me think now. Okay, so I think I was about 23, 24. Yeah, and I think at the time I was living in Leeds and I was looking to move to Manchester. I had some amazing friends and I think they really helped a lot. In terms of creating a network and a family, because within, particular cultures, and I suppose in Punjabi culture, there is this thing is like, blood is thicker than water and your family are more important. Yes, your family are, and it's important where you come from to who you are now, but you can create your own family. And I think it's important to remember that you can. So the women that were around me at the time were absolutely amazing. And so, so I had to move to Manchester, or I was going to move to Manchester. And my mom, and so by this time, me and my mom, we were, talking and stuff, and everything was kind of okay. And she said, oh, maybe we could live together. And I was like, oh my God, Mom. Yeah, of course we could, Mom, but I don't want to come to Birmingham. She goes, no, but I could come to where you're going to move to. I said, okay. I thought, I don't know what to do. So I remember talking to my mate saying, what shall I do? What shall I do? I don't know what to do. And they're saying, look, you can't hide it. You haven't hid it, because it was really weird, because prior to me coming out to my mom, I did take one of my girlfriends to see my mom. And she was like, she didn't know what to make of her. She was very butch, and she was looking at her and she was saying, and my mom would say like, "E bandaya?" And I said, no, Mom, it's a woman. She's a woman. She goes, oh, right. So she's saying, why is her hair short? And I says, she really likes short hair. She goes, oh, okay. So my mom was just like shocked. Why has she got short hair? And she couldn't get her head around that. So I hadn't come back to my mom then. So my mom wants to move in with me. Yeah. And I've got to tell her, well, Mom, yeah, you can move in with me, but I'm a lesbian. So I phoned my mom. So my mates all supported me. I rang my mom and I said, Mom, yeah, you can move to Manchester. I'll buy a house. She goes, okay. And I said, Mom, but I've got to tell you something. And she goes, and I said, I like girls. And she goes, and I didn't know I didn't know the word. There was no word, for me. So I said, Mom, because I didn't know what to say.
Yeah.
I just thought, how can I explain? She goes, so I kept on saying it. I said, Mom, I sleep with women. And she was like, couldn't get it. And I think eventually the penny dropped. And my mom was horrified, because obviously she realized what I meant. And then basically she's in a calm voice, she goes, okay. She basically said, don't come to the house. You're an embarrassment. It's disgusting what you're doing. And she said, if there's a river nearby, find that river and throw yourself in it. And I thought, right, okay. So that was it. Put the phone down and then didn't speak to each other for about, God, must have been 3 years. And I think without the women that were around me at the time, without their support, I don't know what I would have done. I had 2 small children, and then my mom said she didn't want anything to do with me, and it was, they were a lifesaver. And I think it's important to have really good networks. It's important to have a good support system around you. And I would definitely say, if I didn't have them, I don't know where I'd be. I don't know if I'd be here today, because they were so good for me. So fast forward 3-4 years later, so my sister would tell me, oh, Mom keeps on asking about you. And I said, yeah, I'm not going to call her. She's horrible. How can she say that to me? So then, a couple of years later, I phoned her, and she goes, oh, but the kinder theek hai. It was like
nothing had happened.
And I was like, Mom, it's Rahni. She goes, ha, kinder theek hai. And she was like, it's like really nothing. She just come and see me. And I thought, for God's sake. And I thought, what do I do? Do I revisit it? You know, and I remember speaking to my mates and they were saying, look, you can revisit it, but if your mom's not in that space to revisit it, then is there a purpose? You know, and it was like, think about what is it I'm revisiting, you know. So I did a lot of soul searching myself, went to see my mom, and it was like nothing had happened. Absolutely nothing. It's like we literally picked up from whatever conversation we had, and that was it. You know, so yeah, so but it was really funny. So whichever partner I was with at the time, she'd ask, because she knew I was with someone, and she'd say, how is your friend? And it was such emphasis with friend. And I would say, yeah, my friend's fine. She goes, okay. You know, so she didn't want to know, but she would always ask. And they couldn't necessarily come and visit my mom, or I just think, I don't know, maybe they could, but I just didn't want to bring them into that space, you know. But she would always ask about my friend. So yeah.
And I was just wondering, before your mum passed, did you ever get an opportunity to maybe talk to her honestly and reflecting back about how she maybe came around to being how she was when she pretended like nothing had happened?
So yeah, I did. So 2009, I did a lot of soul searching, and I had a lot of conversations with various people in my life, and my mom was one of them. And I went to see my mom for a weekend, and we spoke, and I said, why? She says, well, I didn't know what else I could do. She said, I didn't know. She says, to me, it was wrong. It's wrong. And I says, but Mom, I weren't hurting you. She goes, but you're going to be by yourself. And I said, but I'm not going to be by myself. You know, she goes, but you are. She said, you're not going to have a man to protect you. And I said, oh my God, Mom, is that what it is? She goes, yeah. I says, look, Mom, you know, my father died when I was about 14. And I said, Mom, look, Dad's been dead like 38 years. You've been on your own for 38 years. You know, for the last sort of 10, 15 years, you've been living on your own, physically on your own. I says, are you happy? She goes, yeah. I says, well, then what makes you think that I wouldn't be? She just couldn't. So she couldn't really get, you know, because that was her thing. She couldn't get the fact that if I'm with a woman, then I would be in danger, or I wouldn't be safe. You know, a man will look after me, protect me. And it was like, oh my God, I can't believe that's what you've been sitting with, Mom. So yeah, so we did have closure, and it was good, you know. But I think what the sad thing is, but I suppose you can't really live in would I, should I, could I, doesn't help, is that it's a shame we didn't have those conversations way back. Yeah. But I suppose we needed that time and that distance to have the conversations when we did. So yeah, so we've had, you know, we had a good run of it, you know. So yeah, so, and I'm glad that I did. I'm glad that I actually was brave enough, and for me it was being brave, because I just thought she could reject me again. Yeah. And I've spent this amount of time with her, and you do invest, you know, and you have expectations, even though our scriptures say do not have expectations. Yeah. You know, you invest and you have expectations and you have wants, don't you? It's your mom, you know. Yeah. You want that, you know. I did anyhow. But I was so glad that we did have that closure. So yeah.
Oh no, that's really great to hear, and I can kind of reflect on that too, kind of balancing your own level of authenticity around different people, and how much you can continue to kind of like not be your authentic self around people when you truly want to be. And it's tough, but I think some of the takeaway messages that I can reflect upon from what you've covered so far is, you know, before coming out, having a support network there to ensure that you aren't alone, but also as well, you know, it takes time for people to come around. And and sometimes you might make the first move. I know for me, I would be very stubborn. If I were in that position, I'd be like, nope, don't want anything to do with me. Sometimes I'll just pick up on where you left off. But everybody's different with their unique set of circumstances.
Yeah, I think, you know what, I think it's a hard one, isn't it? When you have rejection from your family because you've made a decision that they don't like. I mean, I left home when I was just turned 17. You know, I went on and had 2 children, yeah, with a Jamaican. Yeah, so I did things that my family really didn't like. When you've got that and you didn't get married and you've done everything that your family say you shouldn't, and you know the rejection is really hard. You know, you get rejected so many times, and I suppose you have to yourself decide, is this what I want? You know, for me, it was really important that I connected with my mom, knowing full well that she could actually turn around and say, no, I don't want anything to do with you at any point of my life journey, me having children, me not being married, me being a lesbian, me cutting my hair, you know, me, you know, that just how I physically looked at times for my mom, which didn't please her, you know. And I would say to my mom, you know, look, I love my life. You know, I love my kids. I love the journey I'm on, you know. And she would, for her, it was like, well, you're going to be by yourself. You're going to be alone. Who's going to talk to you? I said, listen, you know, when I close that door, it's me and my life. It's my world. You know, I will invite who I want in my life. And I think for her, you know, she was from a generation that you had to stay with a family unit. She wasn't, she couldn't get her head around that you could create your own family unit and they don't have to be physically related to you. I think that was really hard for her to get her head around, that my support systems were from the women that I created my family with, you know, and that some of them are still around and some of them are not, and that's okay, you know. And I think that was hard for her to understand, because for her, you've got to have your family there. You've got to be around your family. And I thought, no. But I was glad that me and my mom got to a point that we found peace. You know, we got to a point that she accepted me with all my, however she saw them as faults or flaws, she accepted me, because one of the things she would say, you know, you're my daughter, regardless, you are my daughter. So she's, you know, and I think that was really hard for her as well, because that she was from a time where she would say, I remember at the beginning, look, you know, what are your neighbors going to say? What's the Gurdwara going to say? And I used to say to her, Mom, they're not paying your bills. You know, they're not here when you're by yourself. You know, they're not here when the days are hard and you need something, Mom, you know. And I say, Mom, it's okay. It really, really is okay. And I think over time, she actually saw the fact that I was happy and that I am happy, you know, that I've made choices that she probably thought, wow, actually, you know, that's okay. You're doing good. You know, you're really doing good. And the fact that she could see that I was adventurous, you know, and perhaps that maybe was something good for her to see, because there's things that she couldn't do, you know. She was very much restricted, but the restrictions were what she created herself, you know. So yeah, so I think it was good. But I also think you as an individual, if whoever has a conversation with their family, you've got to decide, is that what you want to do? And what is the cost? Because your safety is so important. You know, there were times I'd go back and, you know, my mum would, or my sister would, you know, be very violent towards me, you know, and I'd run from the house. So it wasn't, I'm not saying it was a plain sailing, but when it got there, it was good. And it was a hard journey, you know, and the fact that we had to talk, you know, we could have like not spoken and it could have just been never ever. But for me, it was important that I wanted that closure as well. If I want my mom in my life, I want it this way, because I didn't want to compromise. I didn't want to pretend, and what I didn't want to do was hide me. You know, it's hard enough anyhow. What the hell am I going to hide me for? And from who? From myself. I didn't want to do that. You know, for Asian women, leaving home at a very young age, making those decisions that you do, like, it's hard anyhow. So why am I going to make it even harder and hide the biggest part of me or the whole of me? It didn't make any sense to me. And I know it was difficult. It wasn't easy, but I think what helped was the fact that I had and I have good support network. And I think that helped.
And then I know you've mentioned the support network as well, and kind of like looking, and when you built up that support network, was that at a time when you really and you exploring some more of your, you know, identity within Sikhi? Was that a time when you were kind of pushing Sikhi away, and you were kind of maybe not seeing it in a very different light as to when you were younger? Like what role did Sikhi play as part of that journey?
I think it was a bit of both. It was a bit of, how can I say? I would still go to the Gurdwara. You know, I would still do my seva, make sure I covered up my hair, whatever color it was, make sure I had the appropriate clothes on. Because for me, there was what I loved about going to the Gurdwara, you know, despite whatever journeys or whatever headspace I was in, is I found a bit of peace there, you know, and a bit of solace. The only thing that was sometimes challenging was when you go and do seva and the women start asking you stupid questions, you know, where's your husband? Where are you from? You know, those things were difficult. But I think I would always pop in and out over the time. But I would say I'm more consistent now than I was then. So I think the difference is, I don't know whether it's age, I hate to say that, but I don't know whether it is that, or is it the fact that I'm more at peace with it? You know, I kind of I think about this quite a bit. Is it because you got to know what battles to fight? Is it a fight? You know, what am I fighting? You know, one of the things that Sikhi talks about is surrendering, isn't it? You know, surrendering to the bigger force, the bigger power. You know, maybe that's not the right word, but Nam, Ikamkar, you know, giving the whole of you. And there's nothing to fight. You know, I've spent most of my teenage and my 20s and my 30s fighting, you know, and I'm in a place, well, actually, I don't need to fight. There isn't anything to fight, you know. I'm relatively at peace with it. And I think it is because I'm actually looking at it myself. You know, I'm asking questions. And I think one of the fabulous things for me has been in the last couple of years, the last year, I suppose, really, is coming to Sarbat, you know, is having conversations with, you know, different communities and different people I've met over the time, you know, and having conversations with different generations, you know, with the younger people, with older people, having and exploring, well, what does that mean? And trying to get a sense of where they're at and sharing what I think I've learned or what I'm still learning. So I think it's a bit of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. Yeah, and kind of like, you know, kind of like weighing up and exploring it for yourself. And although, you know, that you might want to ask, and like you said, you've got lots of questions where you may never find the answer, but it's kind of like maybe you don't need an answer.
Yeah.
And that's where you've figured out.
Yeah. And it's also being at a place where, you know what, it's okay. Yeah. And what's brilliant, you know, the fact that we have social media, you can search so much. Yeah. Back in them days, you'd have to go out and buy a book. And where could you buy a book? You know, it was so hard to get books around Sikhi at library. And a lot of the books were in Punjabi. And, you know, if you messed around at Punjabi school like me and didn't learn your Urera properly, you ain't gonna bloody well read it. So trying to find an English translation was really challenging. And now you can search a lot of things, which is brilliant. You know, you can actually explore, you can go from one place to another, can read so much. There's so much out there. And you can't say, there isn't an excuse to say there isn't information there, you know, that I didn't know, because there is no excuse like, yeah, because there is so much out there. And there's different people have written a different version of how it translates to them, what scriptures mean. And then they've also given you a bit of a backstory as well, which is, it's been fascinating to read so much and listen to as well, because one of the things is you can hear the certain scriptures in English, you know, because the Gurmukhi is really difficult to understand. And if you don't understand it, it's great because, you know, you can hear it in English and you can have it written in English as well. So it's been brilliant. So in that sense, it's great. However, some of the translation is challenging because some of the words are literally translated as they've said, but they just don't make sense. So, you know, it's really important that you go on your own journey and you explore it yourself, and try and get an understanding. Well, what does that actually mean? So yeah, so I'm, like I keep on saying, I'm still on that journey. I'm still learning, still reading, still looking at different ways of my relationship with Sikhi and what that means. Yeah.
No, definitely, and I know when because we've also done that Sikhi course together, when we kind of explore kind of like Sikhi and scripture in more detail. And I know you're very passionate about wanting to highlight and also acknowledge the stories of women within Sikhi too. So I guess it's kind of like a bit of reflection upon that, and also sharing of knowledge too, like about what you found as part of your own research of some women within Sikhi.
You're going to get me to name them and I can't even
You don't have to name them, but kind of like I guess, how was that journey for you? Because I know when I've spoken to you previously, you've often found it very frustrating how it's often not highlighted or glazed over. And actually, you know, it is very, and when we spoke about it being very male heavy, either within Sikhi or whether that's the Punjabi culture influence or whatnot. So yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, what's been interesting is, you know, when we did that course, that was really good because they did explore some of the women within that, Nanak's sister, yeah, and a few other women along the way. And then what that led me on to go on to do was to actually look at who's actually talking about the women. So I went on to, was it Sikh
RI.
Yeah, I think it's the Institute of Sikh Research or something.
Mm-hmm.
And they had some amazing information on there and on their website. So one of the things I came across was that, with listening to their podcasts as well, was that women were usually just either written out, you know, they weren't really spoken about. And because a lot of the scriptures, a lot of the things are oral as well, it was really hard to find, how do you trace these things back? How do you look for where were the women within this? I mean, some women have been identified, and I think Rahni Kaur has written has written about the women, and there's a few other writers who've written about women, but it's a small number. It's not like loads and loads, and I think that's what's difficult. So it's either the Guru's sisters or their wives and who they were and what their role were. And I think what sometimes shows up, because we're getting someone else's version of it, and I'm presuming it would have been men who wrote about the women, and they wrote about the women in very small detail, not enough, you know, so the women didn't really show up as warriors, you know, some did, but not to the degree that you think that they could have. So I think that in itself is a bit of a challenge at times, and I'm still trying to find writers that I can read about the women within that, because all the women that have shown up are sort of because of him, because of what he did, rather than women in their own right. I know there is a Gurdwara in Punjab, in India, that is for one of the women, and I can't remember if it's Guru Nanak's. I can't recall now, but there is a Gurdwara which I'm yet to visit. But again, when you go to the Gurdwaras, one thing I've noticed, there isn't any historical information. It's really hard to get them to tell you. You know, so you go to and find a Gyani and you try and have a conversation with them. And you say, but where are the women? And they don't want to have a conversation with you about women. I haven't met one Gyani who is willing to talk about how are women showing up in the Gurdwara and where are the women. So I think that's a challenge, really, I think, for all of us. Yeah. And I think that sometimes is hard because women played a key role, you know, and still do. And I think, well, why aren't women's history, you know, why isn't her story written? Why has she been sort of wiped out? You know, because she played a role, she did things, you know, she showed up. So why isn't it there? And I suppose it's for us maybe to write those books.
Oh, definitely. And also to have these conversations, and like you said, documenting things, and like we're doing right now, exploring your life and kind of how that can ultimately potentially be able to influence somebody else, or maybe get somebody out of a place which is quite dark, and reflecting upon what you've been through, feeling that they're not alone with those experiences.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing, isn't it? That's interesting what you're saying, you know, is that we aren't alone. You know, I think I knew when coming out that I wasn't alone. I knew when I came out in my 20s that I wasn't the only lesbian in Birmingham, you know, that I was the only Sikh lesbian. I might not have seen them, yeah, but I knew I wasn't the only one. I could not have been the only one. And as time went on, I met many, you know, and still meet many, you know, so I know that I'm not the only one. And I think when you're in that place, it's easy for us to feel, it's easy for one person, you know, for yourself to feel like, oh my God, it's only me. This is only happening to me. You know, when trauma hits, when any upset hits, it is naturally human nature for us to feel that it's just us that's been hurt. And you know, and that's okay. But I would say, you know, is not to live in that place too long, because it's horrible. You know, it's very lonely. It's upsetting, you know, and the pain is too much. You know, it's important that we find spaces that we can talk, you know, that we find people that we can talk to, that we can trust. You know, trust is so important. And safety is so important. I know I've said that a few times, but it really, really is.
No, yeah, definitely. And like I said, I think safety is probably one of the most important things, because without you feeling safe, you can't do a lot of different things, both externally, but also internally too, you know, because sometimes you can prevent yourself from doing something, but ultimately you have to weigh up whether it's going to be the safest option, not necessarily the best option, but the safest option for you.
Yeah, and I suppose especially, you know, if you think about our roles as Punjabis, as Sikhs, you know, our roles to some degree are defined, aren't they, by our parents. You know, when I think back, my mum had defined my role that I would, you know, have an arranged marriage, you know, I'd be married, have a couple of kids and live a life and whatever. But I didn't do that, you know, and that was hard for her as well. I have to remember it was hard for her. It wasn't just hard for me, you know, and she, rightly or wrongly, you know, took a different path, you know, in terms of not being there for me when I needed her, and not being part of my, you know, amazing journeys in my life when I wanted her. Yet when I look at my siblings, she's been part of their journey all along, you know, when the children came, when, you know, they reached whatever pinnacle age in their life, or certain things when they got when they were graduated, or when my siblings graduated, she was around, or you know, and my mom wasn't around for those things in my life, you know, and she was around for certain things, you know, and whether that was a choice or whether it just happened that way, you know, and I can't hate her for it. I mean, I can if I want to, and it's so easy. Hate is really easy to do, but it doesn't serve me. It doesn't serve me any purpose. You know, it doesn't create peace for me. And I suppose for me, you know, listening to Barnia, listen to, you know, Geet, listening to different scriptures and reading them has helped me find peace with it. I'm not saying for everyone you'll find that, but for me, I did. You know, for me, you know, listening to the Moon Mantra, you know, it is really lovely. Listening to Simran is really lovely, you know, whether it's first thing in the morning or whenever I fancy listening to it, even though it's sometimes, you know, this is the morning prayer, this is the afternoon, and this is the evening prayer. No, sometimes I just go, you know what, I want it all now, you know, because it's lovely, you know, it's that meditative feeling it gives me, it's that grounding. And I think that has helped, you know, for me to find peace with it rather than me being angry, because, you know, anger just eats away at you, doesn't it? And I just think, you know what, I want to have a great life. I want to enjoy my life. I have no idea how long I'm on this earth for. Yeah. You know, life, I have a very good friend of mine, and she always says to, you know, she's always says, life is precious, you know, and we have a very short moment in life. You know, we don't have a long life. We have a very short moment in life, and be present to it. And I always remember what she says. It's always a big noise in my head, and it's fine. It's great, because it's important, isn't it? You know, that we make the best that we can with what we have right now, because we never know if I will wake tomorrow. But right now, I'm going to be present to what I have and enjoy what I have. And it's easy to say when some of us may be living in a lot of pain and a lot of, you know, shame, you know, and a lot of heartache and hiding. And like I said, you know, I'm not saying everything lightly, you know, it's hard. It is hard. And you've got to find out what is best for you, you know. And for me, it was important that I was just me, because I just thought, you know what, I didn't want to be, you know, go back and forth, leave home and then go back and forth and hurt my mom and give her a harder time. I wanted to create my own life, you know, and be the woman I wanted to be and make the choices. And some of the choices haven't been good, you know, and haven't been wonderful, but they've been my choices, you know, and they've been a lesson I've learned, and I've had a lived experience, you know, and some of them weren't good, but they were okay. They were my decisions, you know.
That's really great, and really kind of like standing by decisions. And you know, yeah, like you said, you might make right or wrong decisions, but they're your decisions, and then it adds to kind of like the lived experience of you. I know we've spoken a lot about your mum, but we've not really spoken a lot about you being a mum. And I know you've mentioned your children too. So this is one thing I kind of do want to like touch upon as well, about you being a mum, about through this whole journey as well. Like, how's that been for you? Like, because I guess it won't be a unique experience. There might be other people who have similar experiences, but I guess how was it for you navigating your way around being a mum whilst all of these other things going on?
Ah, gosh. How's it? You know what? It's been a challenge. Yeah, it had its moments. I was a teenage mom. Yeah, made decisions. You know, had a relationship with someone, and you know, had children. Not necessarily satisfied at all in the relationship, and it came to an end. And I was very young. I think I was about 20. Well, I first went on the scene when I was about 22, I think. I was pregnant, about 6 months pregnant. I thought, oh, I want to go clubbing. So me and my mate, we went to, I think it would have been Admiral Duncan, I think it was in Birmingham. not all Nelsons, one of them. So we went to this gay pub and we had a great time. So I was about 6-7 months pregnant. And I was thinking, what am I doing? What am I doing in a relationship with a man? And I'm on my second child. You know, what's going on? And at that time, no way did I think, oh, I'm questioning or I'm a lesbian, you know. I don't think I did, you know. So as time goes on, my child arrives. I'm about, I think 22, 23. So I'm a single parent by then. With my second child, I think he was about 18, 19 months old. I remember doing a course. This is where it goes. It goes downhill, or uphill, should I say. On a course, and I was with these amazing women doing this course in I think it was at Birmingham University or Birmingham Polytechnic, one of them. And I met my very first girlfriend. And I thought, you know what? She's great. I just automatically fell for her. And with my children, it was like, I never hid my sexuality with them. You know, it was really, and I never made it into a thing. It wasn't like a thing. I have to come out to my kids. It was very natural. It was, they never ever saw me with anyone but women, you know. And yeah, and I was open to them. I'm very honest. I didn't actually sit down and say, oh, by the way, your mom's a lesbian. They could see that mom was, you know. And I think the challenge was school for them, you know, taking them to primary school. I think that was hard because of the children other children weren't nice. They knew that, you know, your mom's a lesbian. So they would I think there was a little bit of bullying towards my children. So what I did, I became a school governor. I thought that's what I'm going to do. So wherever my children, whatever school they were in, and wherever I moved, I became a school governor, because I thought that's the only way I'm going to protect my children from horrible kids and from teachers who are going to probably be homophobic. That's what I've got to do. So yeah, so, you know, they've come to my parties, they've been to demos, they've been to Pride. When we used to have First Out in London, they used to hang out with me there. So yeah, they're great. They're good. Yeah, it hasn't been easy because I had to raise 2 boys. So it's trying to make sure that they get their privilege as men, and they get how sexism, misogyny works, and the fact that they both came out to me as straight. Because I remember sitting there thinking, right, I need to ask them. I thought, you know, and they both said, no, Mum, I'm straight. And I thought, oh, okay. I don't know what I did wrong there. But yeah. So you know, they're great, you know, but there hasn't been like an issue that I'm aware of, you know. As they're adults now, so my oldest son is 35 and my youngest is 31, I can have these conversations with them, which is great, you know. So I would every now and again, you know, over time I've asked them, so how was it for you? You know, the way I looked, and, you know, I would have a different girlfriend, or how my girlfriends would look like, you know. He said, oh, it's all right, Mom. It's all right. And one of my sons says, well, Mom, if we wouldn't be the men we are today if we hadn't experienced the things that we experienced, you know, the journeys you took us on. So I thought, oh, is that good? And they said, yeah, it's good. I said, okay, great. So yeah, you know, they're great. You know, they've been on so many demos over time with me, so many marches. And when it was Lesbian and Gay Pride, they used to come, but when it became Mardi Gras, I sort of stopped taking them. Because one of the things about Pride I didn't like, it was so much focus on sex rather than what it actually, or originally was about the politics. And for me, that was really important. It wasn't easy for us to be physically out there and be open and walk down the road hand in hand. That was a long battle. People, men and women, people died, and I just think I don't take it for lightly, it's important. So over time, I think there must have been about 13, 14, they stopped coming because they thought, I just thought, it's a bit too sexual. I don't think I want to see my kids seeing someone with a dildo and whatever. I don't think I want that. That's not the image I want them to see of their mother, So it's been interesting. And I think it's a constant journey, because as a mature woman now, life changes. So it's not different partners or whatever, it's very different. It's much a quieter time now. So I think it's been good. It's had its challenges, and I think they've learned a lot in a good way.
Yeah, and it really sounds like that you've been a massive inspiration for them, and I think it was really nice how they've said that you shaped them, because they're your children, and how they see that you've shaped them for the better as well, as opposed to anything else. And I think that's really like a true testament to everything that you've been through, and also the struggles, but also shown them a whole different, open their eyes up to different opportunities that probably would have been never given to them if your life had gone in another direction, or if you were a different person. So
and I think the women and men that they've met through me over time, and that they've formed relationships and friendships with them, whether they're my ex-partners or friends that have created my extended family, quite a few of them are from, are lesbians or gay men, and they've created their own relationships with those people in their lives. And that's beautiful, because it's like they are their Marsian, their Jache, they are those that biologically I can't create for them, that isn't possible,
And I think that's really nice how you've then now blended in, like you said, the biological family, but also the alternative family, the supportive family that you chose. And I think that's really precious how they've also embraced that as well as their own family. And I think that gives me hope, and I think hopefully it'll give other people hope as well, to say that there can be that hybrid crossover of families at some point in time.
Yeah, I mean, it's important that they know where they come from. So I think it was a couple of years, 2018, I took them to India. They went with me and my brother, and they went to Punjab, which was like, my sons are African descent, so my eldest son's got dreadlocks and my youngest son hasn't. So that was a bit of a like, okay, how's this going to work? And my family were great, they don't really, my children don't speak Punjabi. They did exactly like their mom did, messed around at Punjabi school. So they understand and they can pick up what you're saying, but they haven't got the confidence to actually speak it. So
I can really relate to that.
So they had we had a great time. We spent about 3 weeks in India, I think a couple of weeks in the village, and they went to my nange, my bege, my mom's nange. So, and we just traveled, and we went to Hemkot Sahib. So they climbed, and they went Nandpur Sahib, they went all the places that my mom took me when I first went with my mom. I said, I'm going to take you to all the places mom took me. And they loved it, absolutely loved it. So we're planning to go out next year when everything is okay. So yeah, and it's great. It's important that they have that connection, that relatedness of where they come from, where their ancestry is, and what does that mean. And I think it's important I would say for me, that we know where we come from to where we're going to go. You know, you need to learn from the past to go forward. You know, it's important. Shapes us. It shapes who we are. You know, the woman I am isn't just because of my journey. It's all those journeys of all the women and men before me, you know, what they did, you know, and I've got to know that through my experiences of traveling to India, having conversations. I'm not saying that you've got to go to India. So all of you go to India and find out, because it's not always possible. Yeah. And it's a luxury and a privilege that I've been able to have to do that. And that's why I think when you can speak to elders and get that history, it's important that you do, because it gets lost. And I think I was really grateful and pleased and you know, that my mom was able to share that, because then I can part that to my children as well. You know,
Rahni, it's been great talking to you. We could keep on going on, literally, but I think I could keep on going on for another hour. But like I said, that's been over an hour now. And it's been great. So I know you were quite worried about it not being able to talk, but you've been really great, and I've learned so much from you. And I think each time I speak to you, I always learn so much about you and everything, and that you've gone through, but also continue to learn from you going forward. So once again, Rahni, thank you so much for joining me today for this gup-shup. Before we go, I'm just going to release a quick poll for those who are watching, just to get a bit of feedback from today's session, and then we'll be wrapping it up. So Rahni, as it's the bank holiday weekend here, what are you going to be doing?
I'm going to be making a compost bin with my son.
Sounds good. Do you know what? I know so many people have got green finger, they've got allotments, planting stuff, and I think the last year people have really kind of reconnected with nature. That's one thing I've really liked about this too. Just people having the time to reconnect with nature again, and I think it's absolutely amazing. So yeah, I hope that goes really well for you. But that's it for now with Rahni. Thank you. Just a couple of I just need to do a couple of plugs for some upcoming Sarbat events. So we do have the next Bangla class, which is on Wednesday, the 12th of May at 8 o'clock UK time. You can register through our Eventbrite. And also we've got the next board gaming social on Friday, the 21st of May at 4 p.m. UK time. You can also sign up to that through the Eventbrite page. Once again, Rahni, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I look forward to speaking to you again soon. And thank you for everybody who's been watching. Take care.
You take care. Bye.
Bye.